That would be really funny if we got canceled for something that we said immediately before we went live, that somehow it picked up and streamed out.
It's not off like the mark entirely that could happen.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
It'd be like they don't know how to get an enye on the title of a YouTube video. What neo-fascist paramilitary bastards?
There's got to be like an N-word joke in there somewhere. Enye.
Oh,
Enye
yeah.
word.
There's a few. There's a few. I'm sure. I mean, I can't think of them, but I'm sure that they're there.
I would never think of such a thing.
Uh-oh. What does she win for being first?
Who's first?
It's a lady. Ami Erison. Very exotic sounding.
It's very exotic. My Nubian
Very
princess.
Nice. Ooh.
It's true. She
I
she
wonder,
has
like,
sub-Saharan African in her.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Usually a college thing.
She's got a little 1% Jew in her too.
Yeah.
That was probably she's probably gonna be mad about that one.
I don't see why she'd be mad about any of that, Matt. Stephen Messina, with the new audience that we may or may not have today, does not see anything wrong with any of that. In fact, I think it should be celebrated.
This will be very interesting if we have a new audience watching today.
It would be fun.
This first few minutes of banter.
For the new audience, or even the old audience, I don't know if you know this, Matthew, but you were on Pete Quiñones' Free Men Beyond the Wall podcast this weekend. Yeah, and I when I listened to it, I was there was one point where I howled with laughter, and I almost drove off the road. And it was when he said something along the lines of like, it's like, yeah, there's see if we can end on a positive. There's been a lot of negativity here, and I just started dying laughing because I'm listening to you, and I'm just kind of objective. It's like, he's kind of crushing this interview right now. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's like I knew Matt was going to do what Matt does, but just listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, this is a good one here, and it might get some eyes to the show or whatever. I was just immediately imagining someone who's just like, golly, I like what this character has to say, going back and listening to some of the old episodes in the context of like, yeah, there's been a little bit of negativity in this one. Like, oh boy.
Like, oh, I'm sure if I go back to other ones, it won't be so much negativity.
Yeah, and so, because just in the older episodes, for the new fans out there, and welcome to King Pilled, there was a period where the surprise was still fresh of just like, man, what aren't people seeing? And so that, I think that had more like emotional energy behind it when we would talk. And now it's just kind of, the lines are sort of drawn a little bit where, some people are over here and some people are over here. And maybe we've kind of accepted that a little bit. And so it's just the shock has gone. You know what I mean? But in some of those older episodes, I think where it was brand new,
it was
we were let things fly.
Right. Yeah, we were saying some stuff that probably probably wouldn't say now. It's like when you're just like a couple of random dudes that nobody's paying attention to. You're getting 5 views on your video. You're like, whatever, just say whatever I want. Nobody's ever going to pay any attention to this. I'm completely anonymous. And then things change, and suddenly you realize, wait a second, we're getting into territory where you gotta mind your words just a little bit more as they're coming out, if for no other reason than just to be honest, or just to be make sure you're not like being a hypocrite or something like that. Like, so now, if you asked me what we talked about in the interview with Pete, I'd have to sit there and kind of try to think about it a little bit. I like, okay, what did we talk about? Like, it was a complete blur. Just 2 minutes, or 2 hours, just blur straight through. We finished up. I was like, 2 hours. Holy crap. I felt like we got through the like the laying the foundation for the conversation. Like we didn't actually get into the conversation. We just laid the foundation and got like our starting points. And it was 2 hours was up. I was like, oh, geez.
Well,
So
it seems like that's how he also felt.
apparently,
As evidenced by his expressed desire to have you back.
Yeah, which
let me tell you
about.
how I know that you did good. You did so good on that podcast. Like I got invited onto another podcast. You know what I mean? That's how good you did. I'm getting the fall off of like Matthew Erickson glory. You know what I mean? I woke up to a DM this morning, and I was just like, oh man, I guess he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, big things are coming, and I hesitate to get into too many specifics right here for the moment because I don't know exactly how everything's going to pan out, but
right.
All this we were just kind of like doing the video form of shit posting several months ago, but now now there's actually something kind of serious building behind this, and like you said, the lines are drawn. There isn't I think it's becoming clear that there's two separate camps developing, and there's some disagreements within those camps, but increasingly I think it's clear that the two camps are going to be irreconcilable. They're kind of there's a zero sum dynamic here between, I guess I would say broadly, like the paleo crowd and then the LP crowd. And the LP crowd would include the LPMC people. I think that you now have to they see themselves as engaged in a takeover and that they're different from the people who they're taking over. But I think that difference it's actually a distinction without a difference. There's actually, when it comes down to it, there isn't going to be a huge difference between the LPMC people and the people they're trying to throw out. Even though I generally speaking, I probably would rather have a beer with the LPMC people than the others. It's just the nature of politics that joining the game the way that they are under the premises that they're joining it is to kind of water yourself down. And there's just a specific set of behaviors and actions that's called politics. That's called being a politician, getting involved in politics. And you can hear it now when they talk. They're completely different people. They're talking completely differently, expressing values in a completely different way. And their time horizons have just gotten massively shorter. Now they're talking about like what's going to happen in the next week or two. And it's I realize that people can talk themselves into things very easily once they decide that they have some sort of vested interest in it. But to be involved in the sort of petty squabbles and stuff that they're in and think, oh, this is this is really moving the needle. This is what's making the difference. This is what's really going to change the world. This is what's going to usher in liberty. I don't even understand what they mean now. Like when people say that I'm just trying to spread liberty, what does that mean? Does that mean you like talk about it on Facebook? Like you just make spicy posts? Like what does it mean when you say we're just going to spread liberty? It's kind of become just a buzzword. I believe in liberty. Whatever can advance liberty is fine by me. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to advance liberty? To make people more free? Free for what? Free to do what? Free from what? All these things are just kind of undefined, and it's sort of becoming a fad, which there's some things that are good about a thing becoming a fad. That means you've kind of gotten over one hump, which is the hump of getting people interested. But now you've got to get over more humps, different humps. And sometimes the way that you choose to get over the short-term humps can compromise your ability to navigate the long-term humps. So anyway, now that we've got the hump talk out of the way.
Yeah, well, I was just going to add, I can't not add this, if you've been to a libertarian convention, it doesn't look like there's a lot of experience with humps, navigating humps in general.
Very well played. That's very true.
Yeah. There was actually a libertarian convention in I think a state convention, I don't know, but like in my actual city right where I live. And what's the past tense of flee? Fleed? Flew.
Fled.
I fled. I could feel it, you know. Kind of a touchy feely, earthy, crunchy, more than you would think over here. And I just needed to be away from it. I just knew it was there, and I just needed to evacuate, and I did.
You weren't the only
But
one.
oh yeah, and I did want to. Yeah, really.
Right. Yeah. I was talking to a buddy of mine. Shout out, Mr. Stopper, Jason Stopper. He is. I think he lives in your state, or he lives nearby there somewhere. And he'd actually purchased a ticket. He'd spent $100 to purchase a ticket to go there, and then he said after listening to us talk, he just decided it wasn't worth the time anymore. And he was like, I've got better things I can do with my life. Between listening to us and listening to Jason Stapleton, he's really changed his perspective.
Ooh. It is interesting, just, you know, and I know we got to get started, but when you observe people who have gotten, like, I know people personally, and, you know, people that we like kind of know and stuff like that, when you observe them get involved in politics in one capacity or another, running for office or you know, being active in a party or whatever, it's amazing that when you find yourself in this arena, you start performing to the incentives that are in front of you, consciously or not. And, you know, it is gonna change you in many ways. And I think you kind of have to be either okay with that, or have someone around to let you know, right, that it's happening, and ask you if you're okay with it. But you just, it is what it is, you know. And I haven't really kept track of sort of the, you know, what's going on with the New Hampshire thing and the Mises Caucus and all that stuff. But I just, you know, just like 100,000-foot view, it looks like you guys are finding out what politics actually is. Even, you know, in the party of the, you know, the unparty, you know, the people who are not political, and the people who have all the principles and stuff like that. You know, it might not be, the water might be dirtier than you had anticipated, I guess.
And you're going to have to fight just as hard. You're going to have to fight all the exact same things and do all the same stuff. But the reward for doing it is so much less. Like, taking control of the Libertarian Party just isn't you haven't won anything. You haven't won anything worth having. You know, like, if you could do it just with a shrug, then okay, you know, great. You've got an extra asset, but it isn't the asset. You know, if you're blowing your wad to take something over, then you got to take something over that's worth taking over, and then you got to have an idea worth something about, like, what to do with it now that you've taken it over. But anyways,
a Chevette.
We beat that idea to death, and I'm sure we're going to more in the future. We've got some commenters going already here. What's up, folks? Thank you for tuning in and listening to us here. Flavio says that he's here because of the Pete interview. So that's cool. They're showing up already.
Oh, Flavio, I'm sure you're not the only one, but it's good to hear.
Yeah. Do us a favor, guys, and like this episode and like the stream you're watching right now, and then share it. And if you haven't already, then subscribe to our channel. We saw a little jump in subscribers, and for those of you who are new, we have a little game here where we have a little game we've been playing here at King Pilled called like which is going to happen first. We get 1,000 subscribers or we get our channel deleted. And I actually think that the 1,000 subscribers thing is going to happen first now. I think for a while we were
into that one
right.
with that Quiñones episode. Yeah, that really made things take a left turn. Because,
right.
You know, because I think now it's become somewhat apparent that at least a few people are in fact listening.
Apparently,
with the rapid jump in YouTube. I like how it's a podcast, and just, you know, the call to action is subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think it's so funny. It's so good. Like, it's just like, yeah, we're post libertarian. We're also post podcast. in a little sense. You know, we really think. We really think that YouTube is sort of where it's at for unbridled speech.
That's the route we chose to go. We're like, hey, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff that would probably that we probably have to speak in code sometimes, and the way the place we're going to do that is YouTube. We're going to use a Google product.
Mm-hmm.
I love it too. People say that they're like, oh, well, I can't, you know, I want to listen to you guys, but I can't use I can't watch videos like I'm driving a lot or I'm at work or something. It's like I can
Yeah.
only do audio. What's funny is that the majority of stuff that I listen to is only audio. And
Yeah.
it's also only on YouTube. I spend the majority of my time watching or listening to stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
But what I did is I paid for YouTube Premium or whatever it's called, so that
Mm-hmm.
I can still stream stuff with my phone like closed and locked. The YouTube
Right.
app will still play, and
Right.
so I think it's $15 a month or something like that for it. And I use like the majority of the stuff that I listen to is on YouTube, so it's totally worth it to me. So I've told people that before, and I'm like, here I am turning into a marketer for YouTube Premium. I'm encouraging our listeners to give money to YouTube instead of giving it to us.
When we monetize the channel, we can just have it be all, the YouTube Red ads and stuff like that. We'll have an exclusivity deal.
Right. Speaking of ads, there you go. There's a little segue.
We're big on segues here, folks. If
Yes,
you're a new
we
fan.
are. Yep, we love segues. We love our segues, and not the Paul Blart segue. We're talking about the slick transition segue. So we have a wonderful, delightful sponsor here, and I actually remembered to grab some of the wares before I came up. This is Paloma Verde, which is a fantastic little CBD place. This is their premium THC-free CBD gummies. This is a strawberry lemonade. So it's 10 milligrams of CBD per gummy. There's 30 gummies in it. It's fantastic. It tastes great. A lot of times if you get like edible marijuana products, it'll just taste like weed. Like it tastes really strongly like weed, which just often if you're eating it just isn't the greatest flavor.
Gross. Yeah, gross.
at least to me, I guess to each his own. But theirs is fantastic. It tastes really, really good. And then I've also got this mint flavor CBD oil, a little tincture here that is also great. And I've used this for, I don't know if I can say this publicly. Maybe I won't say that. I don't know if I can. I'll have to find out. I'll just say that I use it regularly for multiple different things and multiple different people. And then they've also got a really great muscle rub. They got a whole bunch of great stuff. They just created a new website, palomaverdecbd.com. So if you go over there and use promo code KING, you'll get 25% off any order over $75. And as soon as we finish here, I am going to be going and placing my order because I have one more gummy. So I'm going to have to go several days without. And I forgot to take one last night before I went to sleep, and I slept like shit. And so when I take them, I sleep amazingly, and I have super vivid dreams. That's one thing that's kicked off since I started taking these CBD products just before I go to bed. So go to Paloma Verde CBD. That's PalomaverdecBD.com, and use promo code KING, and that'll let them know that that we sent you. That'll give us a little something. That'll give them a little something. And that'll get you a little something. And so we all benefit. Okay.
I was going to try to add to this read by showcasing the leg that I tore in half.
That's ago. Right. Tell us what happened. I can't
get it up that high, unfortunately. But just be assured that it's gross, and that I will be rubbing CBD ointment all over it, as was recommended to me, by the way, by a physical therapist.
Really?
Yeah. Huh. I was, it's, things are really taking a turn.
What is the status of cannabis products in your state? I don't know if you want to say publicly what state you're in. I couldn't
tell. Yeah, I couldn't tell what the status is. I have absolutely no idea. But I'm in fact in North Carolina, fans.
Excellent. Yes. I've heard it's beautiful country.
Great country out here. Just as close to the mountains as you are the beach. Who gives a shit?
Hey, it sounds like California.
Yeah, I know. It was supposed to be a selling point when I moved here, and not to use harsh language on the YouTube channel so as to get us demonetized, but mountains, as far as I was concerned, could go kick rocks, quite frankly. And so the fact that I moved from Florida to an actual beach Florida, not like Orlando or any of that bullshit, the idea of just you're so close to the beach. Like, what do you mean? It's like, no, you're actually 3 hours away from the beach, but to some people that's close. And I'm just now, after being here for 11 years, getting over that.
I had when I was in high school growing up, I went to a little high school boarding academy up in Canada, and it's in a river valley that's pretty mountainous. And one of the guys that I went to school with there was from, I think he was from like the Orlando area. He was from Florida somewhere, and we would go out and go running. We had like a running group that we would do every morning, and he was just like, he was kind of really religious about exercising and stuff, and so he did it even though he hated it and he complained about it the whole time. But he said that for him, this like running on hills was something he couldn't wrap his mind around because he came from Florida, and I guess Florida, I've never been to Florida, so I guess it's really flat. But he said basically his body was like rebelling against him and asking him why he insisted upon running up and down his roof. And I always thought that was kind of a funny way of framing it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's got to be wild, just coming from such a flat place to somewhere where the elevation changes,
and specifically the way that it changes there, because that is the area when I was there. It's absolutely beautiful, like central British Columbia, one of the most beautiful areas on Earth. It's like a desert. So the hottest temperature that I've ever experienced and the coldest temperature that I've ever experienced were both there. It's high desert land. So the coldest temperature I ever experienced was in the low, I can't remember if it was -20s or -30s, somewhere in there. And that was the lowest temperature rather that I ever experienced. And then the highest I ever experienced was 124. And that was in the same, exactly on the campus there, just out in middle of nowhere. So people think of Canada and they think of like Eskimos and igloos and stuff, and they're there, but there's a lot of parts of Canada that are very, very hot.
Right. And if you're a new fan, just know that this is not just like a segment. Primarily what we do on this show is talk about weather. And I would just like to add to the discussion, Matthew, where it's 124. I hope it's not that humid, because really it's not the heat so much as the humidity that can really, make you feel like you're cooking.
Yeah, lots of people don't realize that. And then when it's
cold, a lot of people don't. And then when you're cold, it really depends on how fast the wind is blowing, something that I call the wind chill effect. So just Stephen
is a budding meteorologist, and that's actually the reason we started this show, was because he wanted to pursue his career as a meteorologist. And so we realized that there's this little known connection between meteorology and archaic, or not archaic, but very niche philosophical writings about the nature of power and the goal and the implementation of government structures. There's this really fascinating niche where those things overlap, and so that's what we're all about here.
That's what we're all about. Weather really is king, guys. I mean, what are you going to do if there's a tornado outside? Not much of anything.
I have to give a shout out here to our good friends Lions of Liberty. They sent me this awesome mug because I give them money every month, and it says "Taxation is death," which I thought was interesting. And if you've read Vin Armani's book, or it's actually, I need to watch his video, because I guess it's not Vin Armani anymore. It's now Cyprian, I think is his name. I don't know, I haven't watched his video yet, so I don't know if he wants to be called Cyprian or if we still find being called Vin Armani. But anyway, so the person who at one time has been known as Vin Armani, he has a very interesting idea on profit, and that profit is literally life. So if profit is literally life, then that would mean that taxation must be death. So I'm wondering if that's what this is connected to. So if one of you Lions of Liberty guys is listening, you could tell me that. And otherwise, if you want to know more about that specific concept from Vin, or from the person who has been known as Vin, then go read his new book, Render Unto Caesar, which is absolutely fantastic. Anyways, okay. So there was one other thing that I wanted to get into before we get deeper into the actual conversation here. Populibs has things to say about climate change. So we may have to bring him back on here at some point to discuss climate change. That would actually be a really interesting conversation. Like no sarcasm, no jokes. He's got some interesting takes because he follows some very interesting people who have non-mainstream opinions about that sort of thing. Okay, so I just wanted to point out this amusing story that's trending on Twitter right now. The UEFA, I actually don't know what UEFA stands for. It's like global soccer. I don't remember exactly what the abbreviation is, but they dropped their investigation into Manuel Neuer's rainbow armband, the Germany keeper. He was wearing a rainbow armband, and they were going to be investigating it because you're not supposed to wear political statements on as part of your uniforms. And so they were investigating that he'd worn this unsanctioned thing. But then they decided that they're going to drop this investigation because they said that actually the armband is a team symbol for diversity and thus for a good cause rather than a political statement. So just a reminder that if you want people to sanction what you're doing, then you just have to remind them that it's not politics. It's just for a good cause. It's very simple. Everything that we do is just for a good cause. There's no politics here. We're just pursuing good causes. And how do you know they're good? Well, they're self-evidently good. Like this, a rainbow is self-evidently good. So him sporting a rainbow is obvious that he's advocating for a good cause. That's not politics. It reminds me of the Moldbug, where he talks about the way that people use politics and diversity, or not diversity, the way that people use politics and democracy. And they like politics has a negative connotation, but democracy has a very positive connotation. And he's like, what's the difference? Like, you can't have one without the other. Democracy is politics. Politics is democracy. And it's to those who were sufficiently red-pilled, I suppose, it's kind of just sort of an obvious. It's sort of like, well, yeah, people are stupid. But I think it illustrates the way that people's minds work on these subjects, where they have these really arbitrary lines that they've drawn, and they set these like fake concepts up in opposition to each other as if there's a difference. And that's not something that someone naturally would arrive at. That's not like a conclusion that someone would just naturally derive. That's a conclusion that you get only from like decades or generations of propaganda, of having these ideas beaten into you. One of the questions that Pete asked me on the in the interview one of the questions I do remember is, he said that, a lot of people will say, what?
I like it was bullet time. Like when he started asking you that question, and I really don't want to take it. It made me my favorite part. Everything slowed down, man. Like, it was just like I saw like Pete in slow motion just doing like a slow pitch softball wind up in this meatball, just like rising and just gently falling as he's finishing the sentence. And I saw my Maddie just right here, just with like contempt and anger, just waiting for it. And then bam. Oh God, was that good. I mean, I knew it was coming, and it was still good, but man, it was the closest thing to like time slowing down, like that I've felt in like a very long time. But it just that whole moment just matrixed right the fuck out for me. But yeah, please continue. God, was that good.
Oh, that's funny. It's funny because when he was asking me, I was actually really kind of trying. I was like, oh man, this seems like this is actually a good question. I'm not sure what I'm going to say to this, and then
I know what you were gonna say,
which is sometimes just kind of like, I don't know, maybe this is just for me, but like when I'm on a video conversation like this, it's very it's a bizarre thing. If you haven't experienced it, it's very bizarre. Like, it's one thing to sit and be interviewed by someone, but it's another thing to be interviewed by someone through a screen remotely, where you're just completely by yourself in a room. For me, for a long time, when I first started doing this kind of thing, I think it was basically mostly on the show with Jason Stapleton, Wealth, Power, and Influence, it was very hard to keep my mind focused. Your mind just wants to go every different direction. It's hard to keep engaged with a conversation with the other person who's talking through this medium. At least it is for me. And so sometimes that'll happen. Like, I'll be in a conversation, I'll be talking, I'll be like trying to flesh out a point, and I'll finish a sentence and my brain will just wipe itself clean. It's like it just did a factory reset in the middle of a sentence. And I'm just completely lost my train of thought, have no idea what I was trying to say. But I just have to kind of keep the mouth going, just keep saying stuff. And sometimes it'll come back and sometimes it won't. So, I mean, it's even right now, I'm trying to keep track of these threads that I've been getting into with this response. And so, I almost forgot where I was going with this. It was this question that Pete asked me. So it was kind of like I'd finished saying a whole bunch of stuff, and then I was like, okay, so what was trying to get back into the conversation, and he asked me his question. I was like, what am I going to say? And so I said it, I said my answer, but I didn't think my answer was that profound. It was almost like I was trying to say something to buy myself time to come up with something else, and he just lost it. And I was like, oh, I guess it's a pretty good answer. So
I did too, my
well, thank you. So the question he asked me was basically like, libertarians will say, well, the reason that people believe all these kinds of things is because they've been conditioned to by all these hours of public school, all this public schooling and all this relentless propaganda and everything. That's the only reason they believe all these things. And so like, that's not an argument against libertarianism or something like that. And he said, what would you say to that? And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think I said something like, does it matter? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, he said, yeah, who cares?
Who cares? Like, the fact is that this is what we have to deal with. This is, we don't live in a hypothetical reality. I keep finding myself saying this. We don't live in a hypothetical reality. We live in this reality where certain events have happened and different events are going to happen in the future. We don't get the opportunity to evaluate the American state as it could have been and then just like invent whole cloth like a new reality where we just say, okay, well, actually we ran this simulation. It's like these people are like programmer minds, where it's like we ran that simulation and it didn't work. So all we have to do is just go back to the starting point and run a different simulation and that will work. But it's like, we don't get to go back to the starting point. This is all we have to deal with. All we have to deal with is that happened. That happens. That exists. This system exists as we have it now. Like, this is here. We have to deal with what's on our hands right now, which is that the vast majority of people for generations back have been subjected to whatever, 15,000 hours or whatever it is of sustained religious indoctrination. And so we have to contend with the fact that if we're going to communicate these ideas, you have to communicate them to people who have been religiously indoctrinated to think that you're Satan. So this isn't a matter of just, we need to come up with just the right arguments to overcome their religious indoctrination. You don't use rational argumentation to overcome religious indoctrination. People have to be unindoctrinated. And one of the best ways to do that is to take their existing indoctrination and just pivot it and redirect it, like reinterpret it in a different direction. Take exactly everything that they've been taught. Don't tell them we're transforming your life altogether. We're going to take this thing that you've been taught to believe is the source of all good things in the world, and we're just going to destroy it. Just throw it out. We don't need it. People should be free to do what they want as long as they're not hurting people. Do you realize how much that freaks people out when you say it to them? Like, people should be free to do whatever they want. Like, it's just completely disengaged from reality. It's so disengaged from reality that it comes off as like pathologically antisocial. People hear that and they're like, you are a narcissistic lunatic. That idea doesn't sell. This idea of anti-statism. That our message is that the state is corrupt and evil and shouldn't exist, and democracy is a failure and all that. You don't market that to people. People don't get like logically rationalized into believing that. They've been indoctrinated to specifically believe not that. So coming at them from that perspective will only reinforce their indoctrination. So this idea that you're going to use the Libertarian Party to go out and present all these fantastic arguments that you've created in an electoral politics setting, and people are just going to go, I wish I'd, it's like people are like these blank slates that can just like wipe themselves clean and start over again. Have this rebirth where they just like reset, go back to factory settings. Okay, now I'm going to install this new chip that will make me think like a libertarian, and going forward we're going to just spread liberty. It's like they have this like cartoonish view of what spreading liberty is. And it's the fact that people have been sustained to all that indoctrination should tell you, it's that in and of itself should tell you that this pathway will not be successful. You look like you're going to say something.
No, I was just trying to think. I don't have enough experience with the Amish to know how annoyed people are or are not with that. What? Why is that funny? I just don't know, But I guess I don't know. If there's plenty of people who will eye roll libertarians or be annoyed by libertarians. It is a turnoff to a lot of people. When when they hear them talk. In being someone who has said some of the stuff, the same things, I've experienced how turned off people are, by the ideas, firsthand. And I was thinking a little bit about what you said, where, I think there is something to it where these people took God out of it, and they put the self, capital S, in its place. And I guess that people can kind of sense that, whether they're religious or not, or whether political or not, because like you said, we're all kind of in this Christian soup, whether we operate as religious people or not. And I guess that's part of the reason why it really does turn people off. Meanwhile, you have the Amish, who I'm sure are annoying in their own ways, but people at least want to visit the Amish sometimes, and maybe what do they make bread? What do they do? There's something that people want from Amish. What is it? It's some kind of food, isn't it? Or woodwork or whatever it is. I'm totally blanking.
I know basically nothing about the Amish.
Under a month ago, someone in these fucking comments I know knows, but you know what I mean? There's a certain, it's like, I guess they kind of reject modernity. And as I grow up and, kind of see where life is going, there's something, respectable about that. I'm not going to go join the Amish, but, I kind of get where they're coming from. And then with libertarians, it's just a lot of screeching, and it does sound pretty self-righteous, which, by the way, one purpose that I think libertarianism serves, if this is just my opportunity to sort of be on the Pete Quiñones show after the fact, is I think it gives a lot of cover, or it's like a cope for underachievers. Like, the IQ of libertarians on average is probably pretty high, or like by comparison, which, by the way, if you have a room full of sort of spectrum-y, Asperger-y twats, as I believe you and Pete said, I don't know who I'm quoting. It's either you or Pete or both. I think that was the terminology that you used.
Nailed
you
it.
would expect that the IQ is going to be up there. And so generally that's one predictor of success. But, if you just simply want to complain about things, and maybe you live out that Jason Stapleton example of the guy who works at Best Buy, which has really taken on its own thing lately, and I think it's great. I think there is something to that. There's something to the type of person who doesn't function great in a group, is probably pretty smart, and maybe has fallen short of where one would think that they would be able to, where they would be able to be in life. And I think that in many ways, like libertarianism, you can just sit back and kind of have all the answers and not really need to do anything because you don't want to participate in the system. And, I think what differentiates that is, there's people who do that who have like a higher power reason for that, some kind of religion, or whatever. Oh, we reject modernity, and there's kind of these principles. Okay, but then like the principle that libertarians have for doing that basically is that is the idolatry of like the self, and that's really what turns people off about it.
They're worshiping it's self-centered. It comes off as, I said this on a comment replying to one of the people commenting on the interview with Pete, that the fact
Pete's in here, by the way. How you doing, Pete? Thanks for
what's
joining
up, Pete? What's up, everybody else in there as well? We've got some good people in here listening. The chat is popping. Popular Liberty says libertarians need to read less Rothbard and more Dale Carnegie. Yeah,
I just saw that.
It's that message. So if you're going into a political realm, into the political sphere, the electoral politics sphere, you got to understand what people are there for, what people are buying. People go to electoral politics to purchase a service. Now, they're not purchasing it with money necessarily. The majority of people are purchasing with they're like legalized fictional sovereignty, kind of. It's like this little piece of sovereignty that they've been granted the privilege of offering to someone. So they're offering that to the person in return for that person giving them what they want. So what are they looking for? Almost exclusively what they're looking for is leadership. They're looking for someone to lead them. That's why people call these our leaders. I mean, they will say, "Oh, they're actually supposed to be servants." Well, servants and leaders are the same thing, really. But the deal here is that people are looking for leadership. They're looking for competent, powerful, strong people who will set a direction and take them there. Humans need meaning. They need to be able to overcome and be conquering. Like there's this will to power within people to conquer and to accumulate. Like Jason Stapleton says that we all have this desire for increase. And so when people are entering this realm, they're looking for that. They're looking for someone who will give them increase. When you take the libertarian message as currently constructed into that realm, what you're saying is you should all be your own leaders and not give away your leadership to someone else. But these people, the fact that they're going to look for leaders means they don't trust themselves as leaders. So if you say you should be your own leader, what they hear is that the most opportunistic people should be the ones who take leadership. The people who are who have the willingness to fight the dirtiest. Like that's where their mind's going to go. The message is not structured for the political arena at all. The libertarian message, it doesn't fit, and it's transparently not appropriate for it. So when people hear it, there's like this level of hypocrisy in it that people just don't like. And so when that happens, it's taken one of two ways. If you're coming into this arena and giving a message that's transparently not fit for the circumstances, it means one of two things. Either you're so self-absorbed you're a total narcissist, or you're so socially incompetent you're a total autist. And both conditions are not attractive conditions to people. People don't want to be associated with those things. So it fails on so many different levels. And I think that you've identified this correctly, that the people who do get attracted to that are, generally speaking, lazy and slothful people, because they get to say, well, I've got all the answers. I've figured everything out. And, too bad nobody's listening to me. If they would listen to me, then we could fix all these things. But nobody does. So it's everyone else's fault that everything's fucked up. And, it's not me. So I get to rest on my laurels and underachieve and underproduce and do whatever else because, it's everyone else the ones that screwed everything up.
And it's kind of interesting because, like, there's a morality to it, which I guess is somewhat respect. There are some morals there, where the state is, evil and does all these terrible things, and you don't want to engage with this awful system. And that I guess you can chalk that up to Christianity in some respect. Again, whether someone is a practitioner or not, but just sort of people who these morals kind of like resonate with, because if you simply wanted to be free and you had a high IQ, you would probably be able to find a way to be freer than you are. And so if you just take like the past year and you decided that, okay, I don't want to be one of these jerk offs running around, in a mask all the time and, kind of being very limited in what I can do. Well, you're probably smart enough to, reach the higher part of some hierarchy that will give you at least a little bit more freedom, and whether that's government, the state, God forbid, or wherever it is, the financial sector, just something that allows you to be, more on the Gavin Newsom having dinner, very, very freely and very not with a mask on his face in the whole bit. You could probably find a way to get there, but you feel that you don't want to engage with that because it's wrong. So you're in this weird catch-22 where you're limited by the amount of like Christianity that you feel, and you may or may not be Christian. And if you're not Christian, you've exalted yourself above Christ, which is like the most annoying combination, of somebody who's just very like pragmatic, like on the other end of like a sociopath. Maybe there's somebody who is just kind of pragmatic and says, okay, well, I want I want things to be better for myself and maybe other people, so I'm going to get involved in the system, and there can be less badness in the world, so I might have to compromise this, that, and the third, but I'm going to get in there and dig. And then there's like someone else who just kind of says, God is my ruler, I will not engage with any of this. Jesus Christ is my only king, and even if voting for person A over person B would result in less suffering in the world and like a freer world or whatever, I don't participate in any of that because Jesus Christ and God. And fair enough. And then there's this other option where you just you do the most annoying part of both of them, and then you just say that you're above everything. You think of yourself as like greater than Christ.
And that's
why it's annoying.
The Wyman, he said that the libertarians worship property rights and presume said rights spring from themselves instead of Christ. That is it right there. Your property rights don't come from you. And this is the, when I talk about, I tweeted something about how my goal is to try to destroy the sacred cows of libertarians, and especially ANCAPs. And that's one of them. The notion of individual rights is all these, how do I say this? The world that ANCAPs are envisioning, where people's property rights are respected, is they've conceived of the correct endpoint, where this relationship that we call property rights, they've conceived at this point where it is respected, it is valued, but they've conceived of the correct world, but they're building it on the wrong foundation. They think that world is because of that those property rights spring from the individual. So the goal is that we need to elevate the individual, and we need to solve for the individual, because the property rights come from the individual. Every individual is born with human rights, and this is just false. It's wrong, but it's not just on them that it's not just that they've gotten this wrong and they're so stupid and how could they get it wrong. This is something that's latent in Western civilization at its heart, at its core. It's baked in, this elevation of the capital S self, or the capital I individual. That, when people talk about individualism, they imagine this hypothetical individual, and they basically treat that hypothetical individual as a god, and that they're trying to match themselves to that hypothetical individual. But then they think that hypothetical individual is God. They think that hypothetical individual that they're made in the image of is God. And so they're trying to use these tools to perfect that individual. This is basically the story of Western civilization. The Reformation never ended. The Reformation bled right into the Enlightenment, which has continued up till this day. This is the same dynamic that's happening. And it's rooted in self-worship. And like capital S self-worship, worship of the self. And that self is a false god. That ideal individual, that highest of all moral values that they're picturing is a demon pretending to be God. I'll just put it that way. It's a demon pretending to be the God upon which Western civilization is built. Because these people, like I talked with Pete, we talked about how Libertarian has an atheism problem. They're playing on a Christian playground. Every single thing that they use is Christian. They're operating within a Christian context. Even they oppose Christianity in a Christian way. They are anti-Christian in the way that a Christian would be anti-Christian. So they think that they've galaxy brained themselves, the libertarian atheists, and this extends out into the Sam Harris type crowd as well. They're exactly the same way. They they see themselves as having transcended Christianity, but really what they're doing is like they're trying to perfect Christianity. They're trying to rebuild Christianity in their own image. And so what we're seeing right now, this whole these different factions that are splitting off. You got libertarians, you've got communists, you've got liberals, you've got progressives, you've got all these different conservatives, you've got all these different factions, the new atheists, and all of them are all descendant from Christianity. They are all swimming in a Christian soup, like you said. The soup is Christianity, and they're swimming in it, and they're just trying to change the flavor. So when we appeal to God, when we appeal to the gospel, to Christian, to Christianity, they want to say, oh, well, what business does that have here? Like, you're introducing something. We can have this without that. You can be a good person without God. Like, that's that whole sort of argument. And it's just a statement of profound ignorance. You don't even understand the tools that you're using. Without the God of Israel as a historical phenomenon, you would not exist with the viewpoint of the world that you have today. These ideas are inextricable from it. The whole premise of libertarianism, the whole premise of individual rights, the whole premise of the individual as we conceive of it is all a product of Christianity. You can't extract the things from themselves. So when we appeal to Christ in this context, you can't just say, oh, well, I'm an atheist, so I'm off the hook on all of this. And the best thing here is that this is the key to communicating to these people. Because all of these people you're trying to reach, the people who've had this 15,000 years or 15,000, seems like 15,000 years, 15,000 hours of indoctrination in government schools, they're Christians. They're Christians in the way that we would call, like I said in the interview, I think that like Rome was pagan. Like they're Christians in that same sense because they exist within a Christian nation. This nation, liberalism will never not be Christian. It's always Christian because that's where it came from. You can't de-Christianize it because, again, it's the same thing. We have the world that we have, that we've had the past that we have. We don't get to create an alternate simulation or a hypothetical We're not running simulations in the abstract here. We're dealing with the actual world that has had a series of historical events that have led to this point that we're building upon to continue. Like, so we have to work with what we have.
Right. It's just like, what are you running? You running Vista? No, 95. Oh, I'm XP over here. Yeah, it's just like
right.
You're in the Windows universe.
Right. And that's so then if you're existing within that, I mean, you could say, oh, well, I'm just going to go out of it altogether. I'm just going to extract myself from it altogether. And
you get a lot of error messages.
Right. You're going to get a lot of error messages. And also, like, okay, so you're just going to go, like, extract yourself from modern society or something. You know, you can't, at this point, every person, like, people aren't born as blank slates. People are born programmed into, and Christianity has become such a global phenomenon. This is why you have to read Dominion by Tom Holland. Christianity is such a global phenomenon that, with the exception of limited areas within the world that have ancient traditions themselves that are that don't necessarily tie directly to Christianity over the last 2,000 years, you are operating as a Christian, and even those ancient traditions have become Christianized. Virtually every single religious tradition that exists today has been compromised by Christianity. Christianity has gotten in there and changed the way that they worship or that they practice their religion, because Christianity has become such a global phenomenon. They, like, the idea of like Indians in India who are Hindu, them identifying themselves that way, saying, I'm from India, I'm an Indian, and my religion is Hindu. That's a Christian construction. That reveals a Christian view of the world. A view of the world that didn't exist anywhere else, hasn't existed anywhere else except for regions that have been dominated by Christianity, by Christian thought. It's like, people think that I recognize in comments and stuff that people say to me, like, I recognize that people think that this is we're trying to use some sort of a slick trick or something to just, you know, make ourselves immune from criticism or something like that by just saying, well, everything's Christianity. But it's like, I'm just describing the the phenomenon that is as it exists. I'm not advocating for it. I'm describing it. I'm saying that it exists and you can do with it as you please. If you want to argue with that, you could try to argue the historical case, but you're going to lose. And I won't even have the conversation with you until you've read Dominion by Tom Holland. So I do want to make sure that we've painted a picture of libertarians, of the autistic libertarians, and there are plenty of people who are in these circles who are not, who are both not autistic, but who also don't see the world the way we do, and I don't want to be unfair to them. I don't want to treat them like we see them the same way as the autists. But what they've done is they've persuaded them. How to say this? They're building on the same flawed foundation. Generally, these types of people are ones who aren't the ones who are digging into the new knowledge themselves. They're kind of taking it second and third hand, and they're just repeating what other people have said. And there's a lot about libertarianism that sounds very, very good. It's very noble. And it's very, I mean, the like Ron Paul libertarianism is very, there's a lot of sentimentality associated with it. And it so closely parallels Christian culture over the last 100 years or so, that to many people they just see this as them practicing them extending their Christian beliefs into the political realm. And for those people, I think that it's not a political conversation as much as it is a religious conversation, where the two I think are the same. But if you focus on one, you'll see if you focus on things from the political angle, you'll see it in a different light than if you focus on it from the religious angle, even though you're looking at the same thing. And that's where we get into this dynamic of the Reformation and the Enlightenment. And as I made the case on Pete's show, that the Enlightenment, I believe, was a mistake. I think that we're getting into issues that are very complicated philosophically, and I don't necessarily have all the answers for them yet. And that's one thing I was telling Stephen before we went live here, that we're kind of getting to the point now where I'm starting to feel I'm like hesitant. I feel like I've maxed out the knowledge that I came to the table with, and now I'm moving into sort of uncharted territory, stuff that I don't like. It's like I need to read more. I need to read more books. I need to listen to more people talk about these subjects, because I've like deconstructed my own view of the world, but now it needs to be reconstructed. Now we need to explore this territory. We need to explore this uncharted territory. We need more minds who are on this, who are working on this, who are trying to solve these problems, who are taking this new approach to Christianity, which is actually an old approach. This kind of this meeting of Orthodox Christianity and libertarian orthodoxy, where those two meet. I think there's a lot of ground that's been unexplored because people didn't realize it was there. They were building on those who'd gone before them without realizing that those who had gone before them were building on faulty ground. And that's really where I think the future of this conversation goes. I think my goal with this is, with this show, with my public image, with tweeting and with talking to people and trying to talk about these ideas, my goal is to try to get more people focused in this area. It's like I want to get a team of researchers kind of to go and start exploring this domain, trying to uncover what truth there is to be had in a more mystical view of Christianity in light of libertarian politics and in light of the collapse of the regime. And there's a few different people we're all talking about this. We're all kind of exploring this realm. And again, I don't have all the answers, but my goal isn't to tell people that I have all the answers. My goal is to get other people looking for answers as well. And so I don't remember exactly how I got down that train of thought. I was wanting to be nice to people, and I don't remember why.
Yeah, there's a list of people that are on deck to have some conversations.
Yeah.
With us, and that would be exciting for all the new fans and the old fans as well.
Very much. People in the chat are talking about a supporting listeners group or a place where they can give us money, and that
I'm not sure why they're not just joining it, because I mean we'd love to have you. You know what I mean?
Like, how many times do we have to say it? Just join.
Join the supporting listeners group.
If you don't know how to do it, then I don't know how you can call yourself. I don't know why you would want to be a supporting listener if you don't know how to join the supporting listeners group.
I mean, I'm calling you guys fans, and maybe that's on me. That's on me. I'll stop.
Maybe our expectations have been too high.
Back that underachiever thing.
I'll just say this: keep your eye out this week. There's going to be developments this week, and
teasy little Matthew. I like
over the
that.
Next couple weeks. Yeah, we'll do a little tease.
Pete really brought that right out of you. I like the teasy Matthew. Thank you, Pete.
Oh boy, things are getting uncomfortable now. Popular Liberty, yeah. Popular Liberty was just on your Talking Over Me with Adam Patrick, and speaking of people who are exploring this territory, I haven't listened to it yet, but I know that it's good because I know the two of them were doing it. So, the two of them were doing it. Well, yeah, they were doing something. So go listen to that. Go check out your Talking Over Me on any of your podcatchers and catch Popular Liberty's conversation with Adam. Okay, so let's see. I pulled open a whole bunch of tabs here on stuff from tweets that I saw that I wanted to incorporate into this conversation. Let me see which direction I wanted to go. Let's say, okay, so this one here, someone was this wasn't a serious tweet from a guy. He was being tongue in cheek. How much background do I give here? He just was joking with me about, my problem is that I don't actually understand the nap, and when we're talking about the autists, that's the type of person he's making fun of. The guys who, their response to you criticizing libertarianism is, oh, well, you just don't understand it. You just don't get it. If you understood it the way I understand it, then you would be better. You really need to understand the nap. If you don't get that, then you just don't get libertarianism. These are the types of guys that I have no problem just mocking, because I don't need to defend our bona fides on the nap. But I think that we're going to do an episode one of these days here where we specifically dissect the nap. But I quote tweeted the guy's troll tweet, and I said, the nap is just the silver rule for autists. The silver rule. So the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The silver rule is don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto you. So I said it's a negative principle, because it's not positive. It's not prescribing an action. It's saying don't do this thing. And that means, so as a negative principle, it's useless on its own. It has to be incorporated into a positive prescriptive set of principles. So, if you're coming here like, oh, you just don't understand the nap, it's like you need to catch up. Like you need to speed up you need to get through Libertarianism 101. If you're still going around throwing the nap at people, then you're one of these people. You're one of these guys that I talked about that can't hack it in the whole playground, so they want to try to be king of the sandbox. They're going to keep restricted to their little group here, and they're going to fight for in-group status within their smaller group. And so the in-group status is, oh, you have access to the secret knowledge. I have the secret knowledge, the true understanding of the nap, and you guys don't have it. So you that's your problem. Is if you had that true insight, you had that true gnosis, then you could be cool like me. So we'll get into the nap more in a future episode, I think. And this may be some of these new projects that people are undertaking over the next. There'll be more news about them over the next couple of weeks. I think that one thing I may start doing in some venue somewhere with whoever wants to do it with me is critiquing, offering distinct, substantial critiques of individual libertarian dogmas. and why they go both sides of it, like how they're derived, why they're important, what observation they make, why they're valuable, and why they're insufficient, where they fall short, what they don't accomplish. So this is nerdery for libertarians, but I think that to start expanding into this mystical territory, we're going to have to slay some sacred cows, so that it's like we have to slay the sacred cow so that we can feed ourselves, so that we're nourished to go explore the new territory. And so there's an image for you. Then there's a couple tweets here I just wanted to highlight from a couple people that were very insightful.
This one that I want to highlight, just if I may, is that someone said that this looks like a live action Lion King. Or something like that. I think that was pretty good. That really took it to the next level past like Jesus. And and if it's your first time watching, then yes, that's like a very cogent like observation. But man, perhaps to have someone take it to the next level of Lion King, I haven't heard that one. So that's my pick. Why don't you go ahead and do your thing now?
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. That was great. Live action Lion King. I was thinking of something like with Coheed and Cambria was what like I'm waiting for someone to bring that up. So I guess I just there you go. So this guy's Twitter handle is @MorlockP, and he said he quote tweeted a Julie Borowski tweet, and she said, "I believe 5% of the popular vote is reachable as long as they can keep the libertarian base and get some of the disaffected right. So don't scare them off." This was prior to the last election, and he said, "LOL. I've been engaged with and aware of libertarian politics for 30 years now, and this is the same counterfactual nonsense Ernest Kidd said in 2016, 2012, 2008, 2004, 2000, 1996, 1992, and on. Face it, libertarianism may be right and moral, but people want to be ruled and shepherded. That's it in a nutshell." I mean, we could really just take that phrase right there. Libertarianism may be right and moral, but people want to be ruled and shepherded, and just like plaster it across our YouTube channel. We wouldn't need to do any more episodes, but that would deprive us of the opportunity to make fun of libertarians, and there's no way I'm going to deprive ourselves of that. So, but that's it in a nutshell. And as Popular Liberty has pointed out before, he said people want to be ruled. Libertarians don't trust anybody doing the ruling. So it seems like this is a match made in heaven, that the libertarians should just be ruling all the people who want to rule. And there's an insight in there. Then so someone replied to that, and he said, his @AG Stover, he said, in quotes, "Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff is not a winning argument when people actually quite enjoy hurting one another and have no problems taking other people's stuff." So that "don't hurt people and don't take their stuff" will be another one that we will probably do a takedown of, because it's nice, but again, that's the silver rule. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff is it's kind of the silver rule and golden rule blended up, but that's not sufficient. Don't hurt people. Okay, we'll define hurt. Don't take their stuff. What's their stuff? What does it mean to take it? All this stuff comes down into ownership and property and all that sort of thing. But people have these conversations about ownership and property, and they think of it in like weird abstract ways that aren't actually replicable, that don't actually have any bearing on reality. What property rights are, some of the most, people think of this as like very dry scientific stuff kind of, but property rights are like spiritual. Property rights are some of the most superstitious stuff. It's entirely based on consensus, and it's derived from the spiritual values of a culture. What property is, ultimately, property is just something that's secured by violence, really, ultimately. But at another level, it's just agreements. It's just people who are agreeing with making, like, people have all collectively agreed that this is your property, and we're not going to gang up and take it away from you. Like, that's what property rights are rooted in. And people want to say, oh, well, you're born with these, or innate within you and stuff. And those are fine subjective perspectives to have, but You've either got to convince people of that, which is pretty hard because, as this guy points out, people are very happy to hurt other people and have no problems taking their stuff. So you've got to try to convince them. And failing that, you just have to have the power to prevent them from doing it. And that's far more than having a big arsenal of guns. Like, that's not sufficient. That's not practical.
There's like a lot of there's some pushback on the idea of, you know, that we're operating in this Christian atmosphere, like literal atmosphere, like the fish being in water, saying that the water's warm today. What's water? That right. Example. There's some pushback against that, and I just wonder, would the same people push back? You know, if you just dismiss that for a second, put that on the back burner. Okay, would you disagree with the fact that we are chimps, basically, at the end of the day? Like, is that one you can grab onto? Because I don't know, you know about chimps, you know, but I mean, there's a propensity for violence in taking things and hurting each other. You know, so it's just okay. We're not all Christians. Are we all chimps? Is that fair enough? Can we take it from there and move forward? And then sort of, because once you want to move past being a chimp, kind of a nifty way to do that is Christianity.
Right. Bingo.
Takes the human nature out of
Yes. That's there's a profound irony in there that it's all the guys that are like, oh, I don't need Christianity, who are also like, you know, property rights are self-evident, bro, or you know, whatever their position is, that it's just like, oh, well, we've already solved what property rights are. It's just a matter of like enforcing. Well, yeah, it is. It's a matter of enforcing them. Do you know how to enforce them? You enforce them with power. Property rights are enforced with power. If you don't have the power, you will not be able to enforce them. And property, like ownership, requires like final say over the thing. If you don't have final say, if you don't have the ability to enforce that claim, you don't actually own it. James Gentleman in the chat here, he said that property is the ultimate social construct, and our social constructs are not aspects of reality. They absolutely are aspects of reality. Social constructs are definitely aspects of reality, but you have to recognize them for what they are. It's a social construct, which means it's ultimately going to be derived upon the values of that culture as expressed through what people communally form consensuses, form a consensus around. So property rights is just a consensus. And sometimes that consensus can be arrived at by force. Sometimes that consensus is arrived at because people have an incentive to believe in it, apart from force, because they're tapped into a spiritual ethos that guides them, and they have an incentive to participate in this community. So you're having to address these things at a completely religious level. If you form a religious community where everyone in that community believes in a religious principle that enforces those property rights, that binds people together, then you can have any economic system you want. The economic system is derived from the values of that community. And this idea of the individual and property rights and being inherent in the person, all that, that's Christian. That came out of Christianity. That came from people who grew up in the Christian atmosphere, swimming in the Christian soup, who saw the world as Christians, who were trying to derive something, quote unquote, deeper than Christianity to base things on, because they didn't want to just like have faith in the church. They don't have faith in Christ. They wanted to create some sort of, it's this positivist urge that humans can just prove and establish and define everything. We don't need to appeal to God. So they say, well, property rights are inherent in people, and you just have them as a right of existing. That's only relevant if you're able to enforce that belief, or you're able to just have super great persuasion skills and you convince everyone to just agree with you without you forcing them to. So those are your options. If you believe in property rights, then you, by definition, want to exist in a society where those property rights are enforced, where everyone agrees on them and there's a system to enforce them. That's when you're getting into the engineering conversation. How do we engineer the system where these property rights are enforced? When libertarians, when ANCAPs or anarchists in general, they make the state the big boogeyman, the big bad boogeyman. They make the state like the basis of everything. They define themselves with respect to the state. And I completely forgot where I was going with that train of thought. They see, that's one of them. Their brain just completely wiped. ANCAPs, property rights.
When in doubt, just say who cares, because it really worked out for you last time.
Who cares? What difference does it make? Practice hesychasm. That's something that's on my list of things to read and to study about. So if somebody wants me to finish that thought, you can put in the comments where you think I was going, and maybe you'll remind me. What I wanted to do here, I finished with that, and okay. So good friend of the show, Buck Rebel, Buck from Counterflow. He said there is an irony for libertarians in that they have a stated end goal, but nobody has built the road to get there. And I thought that was just beautiful. That was just perfect. I love it when the universe winks at you. You know, libertarians have all these conversations about roads, and they're like, "Oh, anybody can build the roads." You know, you don't need a state to build the road. And then they talk about how they have this utopian view of reality that would just be perfect if they just could get everybody to buy in. And it's like you're trying to get everybody to buy in and go on a trip with you, and you haven't built the road for you to take that trip. You have a destination that you've conceived of, but somebody has to go build that road to get people to that destination. It's just a beautiful way of containing this idea of what it means to be king-pilled is really that you've recognized this reality and you've dedicated yourself to participating in building that road, building the roads to get there, and then solving for the most efficient or effective or the best possible systems for both building that road and keeping people on it to get to that end goal. So within that context, there was a comment on the episode with Pete from a guy who I've seen him on Twitter before, Daniel. I think his name's Daniel Hong or something like that. I've had some back and forth with him on Twitter before, and he commented on the episode, and he had some good criticisms. I appreciate the criticisms that he made, because he's touching on stuff that I've thought about before, that I was even thinking about as I was talking to Pete. And I've kind of, there's certain things that I've said before that I've kind of made a habit of repeating these phrases on purpose. And I know that the phrase brings up questions as much as it answers them.
Is that the one where you're always kind of like going on about who runs the media?
That's exactly it. They just run everything, man. I realized that I'm kind of creating a begging the question sort of a situation with some of these things that I said. And so he asked those questions. And so I wanted to respond to some of the things that he said. So he said, "I'm a Catholic Austro-libertarian, and I've fought with these ideas for a while. Plenty of the things he said I already knew. I do think Matt is making broad generalizations about libertarians that don't apply to how I understand libertarianism. In some ways, it seems like Matt is setting up a straw man of libertarianism and knocking it down. He's expecting too much from the philosophy of libertarianism. It is lacking plenty, but it doesn't give that." And there's more there, but I will stop and address a couple of things he said here. And I'm keenly aware of the fact that sometimes when I'm describing libertarians, or when we're doing it on the show here, even not just in that interview, we'll talk about libertarians and we stereotype them a little bit. And part of that is just the nature of a conversation like this. You can't address every single possible dynamic, so you kind of generalize and you speak in broader terms, and then as necessary, you drill down and speak more specifically. But the libertarianism that I describe is not libertarian canon, because what I'm describing is the way libertarians act and what their actions reveal about what they actually believe versus what they claim to believe. because it's very easy to read something and say, okay, well, I believe this. I have intellectually acknowledged this thing that I just read, this Rothbard article, or Economics in One Lesson, or whatever libertarian piece of canon you've read, and you believe this thing. But then when you act, the way you behave reveals that you believe something different, or you believe something deeper. So belief and action are actually basically the same thing. Because if you believe something, that means to truly believe something is to act as if that thing is true. If you're not acting as if that thing is true, you don't actually believe it, you just think it. And then once you've acted, by definition, you believe something, because the act of acting implies belief. So belief is an active thing, and this is, you should sense the Christian undertones here. This is belief in the Christian sense is active. It's not just an assent. Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved. That's not, I have made this intellectual. I've connected these intellectual dots, and if somebody asks me, I tell them, yeah, I believe that thing. That's not what belief is. Belief is like the thoughts that guide your actions, or the thoughts that determine your actions. If you haven't acted upon them, you don't actually believe in them, you just think them. So libertarians say they believe certain things, but then their actions reveal that that's not the case. So, for example, libertarians claim that they want to live in a libertarian society. But the actions that they take don't take them any closer to a libertarian society. In fact, they take them away from it. We're moving further, and the more libertarianism as an idea spreads, the further and further we're getting away from a libertarian society. So libertarians say, oh, what we need to do is we need to join together and we need to take over a political party and try to tell other people about our ideas. So their thought is, when we take over this party, we'll convince other people and our movement will develop power, and with that power, we'll be able to enforce our will on people. But then they'll say, well, we don't believe in forcing our will on people. It's like they want everyone to just kind of agree. They want people to just kind of naturally agree. But they're getting involved in politics. And the nature of politics is it's a place where you go to enforce your will on other people. So there's an inconsistency between what they say they believe and what they actually believe. So they say, well, we want to get into politics not to enforce our will on other people, but just to tell people about what we believe. But you don't need to get into politics to do that. And in fact, that's actually a bad way to do it, which was the case that I was making on the show with Pete. And when if you think through each possible step of what you're talking about, like, what are you actually building toward? What is your idea? Your idea, as far as I can tell, is we're going to get so many people who all agree with us about the nature of the state. We're going to get so many people that we have such a significant capacity for influencing the culture that we will force people to no longer support the state. We're going to make it so people cannot create a state because the state is wrong and you should not act as an actor of the state. Like, what is your end goal apart from that? When you say, well, we want to spread liberty, what does that mean? You want to get enough people who all think like libertarians. So what happens when you get 57% of the population thinking like libertarians, and the other 43% wants to create a state? What are you going to do? When you have the capacity to prevent them from creating a state and imposing it on other people, what are you going to do? Are you just going to say, oh, well, you're free to do what you want as long as you don't hurt people and don't take... Well, isn't creating the state hurting people and trying to take their stuff? So you've now reached this point where you claim, well, we don't want to take any power. We don't want to use power to force people to do what they don't want to do. But if they want to create a state, if we live in a society where people want to create a state and then enforce themselves on us, well, you're going to force them to stop, right? Well, that's self-defense. Okay, so then isn't it self-defense to engage with the state now in whatever way is necessary to stop them from doing something that's being forced to, like, I don't know if I'm explaining this well enough, but like there's a distinction there between what you actually believe, which is revealed in the way you act, and what you think you believe, which is revealed in what you say about yourself. So what I'm speaking to is the former, not the things that you claim you believe, but what is evident that you actually believe based on the way that you act. So I know that people think that I'm strawmanning libertarians because I'm not taking you at your word. I'm taking you on your actions. When you act in a certain way, that reveals what you believe. And I'm going to speak to that, not what you're saying about yourself, not what you're claiming. Do you have any thoughts on that?
And I will say, in the defense of strawmanning libertarians, I often feel badly that I do that too, but that it doesn't come from nothing, and it doesn't take but being around a group of libertarians or being in like some kind of place where they're discussing ideas to be reminded that, you know, even if you sort of have a caricature in your head, it came from somewhere, and
right.
You know, like a lot of what we're saying and describing definitely exists, and it's also not personal, by the way. Like none of it is coming from a personal place. It's just trying to describe what is, which is right. What I think we're both in the business of trying to do. And there's definitely, although everyone is a unique snowflake, it does seem there's a lot of guys. They're usually white. You know, you kind of keep going down the list. You know, and there's different people that are attracted to libertarians. We're really, I think, even only addressing sort of the segments that we think are even worth sort of talking about.
Right.
Occasionally, you know, occasionally talking about, you know, sort of the other, you know, stereotypes or, you know, aspects of libertarianism. We're dealing with like the cream of the crop, if there is some, right? And right. like you said, I think I would rather get a beer with a lot of people in the Mises Caucus and you know, then again, fair enough. But yeah, it's not personal. And, you know, every time that there is this idea of, you know, well, am I being too hard on these people? And is this really how it is? You'll get reminded real quick. You know, that there is a very broadly autistic element, you know, within, you know, people that are, you know, engaging in the Libertarian Party, libertarian politics.
Yes. And if you don't identify with that,
they all work at Best Buy. Every last one of them. Y'all work at Best Buy. I know you do.
You got to do it. You got to do the impression.
No. That's for the supporting listeners group.
Okay. Yeah. Got to join the supporting listeners group for the impression.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to hear a really, really great impression, you know, join that supporting listener group that we gave explicit instructions how to join earlier.
and you're a loser who works at Best Buy if you can't do it. So if you
That's right.
if you don't identify, to tag on to what he was saying, if you don't identify with the way that we describe libertarianism or libertarians, then, you know, don't get mad and say that. I'm not saying this guy here is getting mad. Just in general, don't get mad and say, "Oh, well, you've that's not what libertarianism. That's not what libertarianism means to me," or whatever. Well, there's no reason to get mad. If you're getting mad, you're the one identifying yourself with it, not me. What I'm describing is this certain type of libertarian. Obviously, there's lots of different types of libertarians, but I'm perfectly happy to engage with you on your territory of the way you describe libertarianism for yourself. Because I know that the criticism will have a different flavor, but it's still going to reach the same conclusion. Like I'm still going to reach the same conclusion about you, that there's something about you, by nature of the fact that you consider yourself a libertarian, there's a flawed foundation that you've built upon, because that's just the nature of libertarianism, and it expresses itself in lots of different ways. And I mean, frankly, it's easiest to make fun of the autists. It's easiest to make fun of the most egregious examples. But I'm saying this going forward in the future. Like, if you feel like I'm straw manning, and I assume this holds true for Stephen as well. If you feel like we're straw manning something, well, tell us. Say that isn't the way that I've experienced. This is the way my experience with libertarianism works. This is the way that I'll see it, and we'll address that too, because we're confident in the way that we see this. We're confident in our critique, and we're confident in what we're seeing going forward, and we can apply it to you in whatever way you want us to.
I think I have a handful of like Facebook friends that I could like rattle off, specific names, and I haven't really gone out of my way to friend a lot of libertarians on Facebook. So I know there's more than those people, but like I have a handful of them that, if I didn't know any better, I would say that their explicit goal is to write a future for themselves where there's the highest probability of getting raided by the FBI, just judging by their behavior. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I just
constantly posting pictures of their arsenal. Right.
Yeah, man. Like and kind of going out of your way to seemingly to piss people off, or like if you throw in that kind of new social justice-y bent, very inclined to sort of like dox people, or not dox people, but just sort of highlight maybe bad behaviors and put other people on blast. It kind of seems like you're running around trying to bother a whole bunch of people, while portraying yourself as like a caricature that it seems that the present regime is trying to demonize more and more on a daily basis, and make laws, that can have some very unappealing, you would think, consequences to them. So it's like, I don't know if this is like a martyr thing that we're trying to do, or just like, you're at a vulnerable age, in your kind of 20s or whatever it is. But I think you even mentioned on Pete's show, that people, this isn't just us trashing people. I mean, it is that, but there are potentially going to be victims.
Yeah.
And so, when you have like sort of this like young, predominantly male energy, behind something that's getting whipped up by people who you would think would know better. It's like, yeah, man, there could be some costs to this, and if the culture is like centered around like a lot of things that are just becoming less and less popular, like guns, and again, we did mention that a lot of these people happen to be white, by and large. That's really falling out of vogue very quickly these days, and if only that it can be used against you if you kind of fall on the wrong side of any issue. Yeah, man. There's some bad stuff that can happen.
I think there's a strong streak of people who actually see themselves as martyrs, or would be willing to martyr themselves for this. And I mean, if you're going to martyr yourself,
41 people in the chat. It's the first time ever. I just had to say, I've been waiting for it the whole time. We've been flirting with that 40 number, and there's 41 in the chat. God bless all of you.
Nice. All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. I think there's a very strong degree of martyrdom instinct within this kind of. The people are like, oh, we're just right on the cusp, and we need to have, someone needs to die for the cause, and it's going to whip up. There's a dynamic where martyrdom is, where martyrdom is valuable, or is useful, or productive, and we're not there. We're not even close to there. If you're going to martyr yourself now, you're not martyring yourself. You're just dying pointlessly. And I think that applies to whether you're like literally dying, or if you're just being, you're being unpersoned, you're putting yourself in a position where you get wiped out. You losing your, right to bear arms, or, getting locked in a cage, like all that kind of stuff. Like putting yourself in that position now is pointless. Like for me, I'm not going to put myself in a position where, someone could call me a pussy or something all they want, but I'm not going to put myself in a position where where the regime has a reason. Look at the eye of. I'm not going to draw the eye of Sauron onto myself needlessly. I have a son. I have a wife. I have a family to care for. I have people who love me. I have a family. I've got friends. I've got a good life. And this isn't a cause to die for like that. Like, this isn't, dying for it doesn't do anything. I mean, if you're convinced that that's what you want to do, then, great, but knock yourself out. But a lot of these people, I think, are there's a lot of discontented, dissatisfied, using that as a very loaded term, dissatisfied young men who get involved in these kinds of movements. And they have a lot of, shall we say, unchanneled energy that's being channeled. And like, this is, it's funny, but like, this is a very real thing that when you get a lot of disenfranchised, dissatisfied young men without an outlet, and you get them whipped up around an idea, that's the last area where you want bad leadership. And it's downright irresponsible to get a bunch of young guys whipped up on something like this, because history tells what happens. A group of young men can completely change the course of history in many ways. And you want to make sure that if you're going to channel all that young male energy, you want to make sure that it's channeled responsibly and in a productive way that's actually going to have a positive outcome. So these guys that are, this whole, like, people who are LARPing that there's some rebellious badass on Facebook is like, this come and take it. And, look at all my, Second Amendment, and I've got my thing, like, just all that energy is, it's LARPing. It's LARPing as if you have power that you don't. You're cashing checks that, you're writing checks that you're never going to be able to cash. Because you don't have that level of power, and ultimately, it's what it's going to come down to is power. So act with circumspection, and if you're gonna pretend that you have power, make sure that either you're not pretending, or that you've got a pretty good fallback plan. Okay, so to continue with this comment here, this is where it was kind of getting into the stuff that. I've kind of waited for somebody to bring this up when I've talked about it this way, when I've phrased a certain thing in a certain way, and I'll explain here. So he said, one other thing. He said he's expecting too much from the philosophy of libertarianism. I'm not the one expecting a lot from the philosophy of libertarianism. I'm saying that libertarianism is insufficient. I'm saying that libertarianism it's not like, if you're identifying yourself as a libertarian, you're expecting too much from the philosophy of libertarianism. It's not something that is so, it's not something that does so much that it's worth involving your entire identity in it. It's insufficient. It's not, you saying that you're a libertarian is an expression of your relationship to a democratic state. That's something that's so limited across the spectrum of human experience. The democratic state is just an organization. It's one type of human organization that's existed for a limited time span of human history. And you're saying, I have this specific set of beliefs with respect to this organization, and I'm going to define my entire identity around that. That's someone who's expecting too much from the philosophy of libertarianism. The nap is what libertarianism is. It's one puzzle piece for a larger picture. But when you identify yourself with the single puzzle piece, then you lose sight of the fact that other picture exists. So he said, I haven't heard this boot drop yet, but it does seem like, since Matt is poo-pooing on classical liberalism entirely, a lot of messed up stuff can come from... It does seem like Matt is poo-pooing on classical liberalism entirely. A lot of messed up stuff can come from that. Yes, I am. I'm not just poo-pooing on classical liberalism entirely. I'm completely... I'm blowing it up. Classical liberalism is the product of the Enlightenment that makes the Enlightenment a mistake. And a lot of messed up stuff can come from that. A lot of messed up stuff comes from classical liberalism. It wasn't until classical liberalism was introduced that we had the most murderous century in human history. That's born out of classical liberalism. All of the biggest, baddest boogeymen that are tossed about today are a product of the insidious insufficiency of classical liberalism. He said, I would just caution against throwing all of that. As Matt said, the basic principle of respect, etc., are rooted in a Christian basis. The boot I am waiting for is that Matt will be advocating for his boot on my neck since he believes the ends justify the means. So now we're speaking of straw men. Nowhere did I say that the ends justify the means. But there are certain cases where I would advocate for my boot to be on your neck, as is implicit in the definition of property rights. Like, this is like, libertarianism is not pacifism. There is a time and a place for boots to be upon necks. That's life. That's implicit in the concept of libertarianism. Now, he's speaking, perhaps, I think what he's getting at is this idea that I'm going to advocate for an authoritarian political movement that conquers the rest of the world and imposes its will on it. So he's basically, in a veiled sense, saying that I'm flirting with fascism. And the problem with fascism is not that it's authoritarian. The problem with fascism is that it's democratic. That's corruption. The problem with fascism is the corruption that's implicit in it that's inherent to it because it's democratic. Authoritarianism is not bad. Authoritarianism is law. I don't understand this. Like, we've associated authoritarianism with tyranny, but authoritarianism is not tyrannical inherently. Unaccountable authoritarianism is tyrannical. But authoritarianism is, like, the enforcement of property rights is authoritarian. A society where property rights were respected absolutely, which is what Ancapistan is, would be an extremely authoritarian society. If you violate the property rights, an authority is going to put his boot on your neck. You can't talk about believing in property rights but not want them to be enforced.
This is, from a group of people who, love guns. You know what I mean? And it seems like it's kind of like the kind of people that almost wish someone would break into their house and violate their property rights so they'd have an excuse. So I've always found that like aversion to, that's authoritarian. It's just like, man, you guys are kind of itching to kill people to preserve your way of life, which fair enough, but it is a weird critique coming from a lot of those people. And again, maybe it is just kind of like LARPing, and it's kind of fun to just, like as a lottery ticket, have talk about the arsenal that you have and, how, what would be enforced. But I mean, like, again, I'm not making up these conversations in scenarios when all these kind of hypotheticals come forward, in violation of the NAP would result in some real authority by way of violence,
Right. And I want to be clear that, I know you're not implying this, I want to be clear that this guy here, Daniel, that we're responding to he's not one of those. He's not one of those jackasses that's out there, hanging his metaphorical dick out on social media. He's, I think he's a good guy. I think he's a very sincere guy. And that's why I'm taking the time to reply to him. But the libertarianism is not about being opposed to boots on necks. Libertarianism is about being opposed to the wrong boots on the wrong necks. Sometimes boots need to be upon necks. And that's the nature of reality. It's a reality.
It's also going to be our first t-shirt, whatever that's worth.
Yeah, there we go. That'd actually be great. Sometimes we could do a riff off the Gadsden flag. Hey, we'll come up with ideas. We're definitely going to do merch. We should have I think that we should have our branding here for the show before too long, and we're excited about some of the merch and stuff that we'll be able to do once that happens. So
we're gonna tread on you sometimes, maybe in a generation or two.
Yeah, the a society where law is privatized. So this I think there's the distinction between government and state is relevant here, and people will use them interchangeably, but government is inevitable. There will be something that governs the society, and basically the ANCAP position is that government should be privatized. Well, what else is a monarchy? A monarchy is private government, where the monarch owns the government. Like that's what monarchy is. So it's been taken. This is part of the product of absorbing, because libertarianism, as it's expressed generally speaking today, the whole intellectual framework for libertarianism is broadly right wing, because it took in the conservatism of which is a Christian thing. It took in the conservative Christian thing of what's his name, like Goldwater, and before him was Taft. It's that sort of conservative Christian background, which kind of embodies, like a spirit that kind of embodies it. It's fundamentally today the way that libertarianism is expressed. Even though there's the libertines, all the pink-haired goofballs that get that are in as well, they're definitely leftist, and really on a drawn out left-right scale, libertarianism is wholly within the left side of it, because it's expressed as a subset of classical liberalism, which is itself furthest left on the biggest political spectrum possible. But as Popular Liberty has pointed out, when people have these intellectual conversations about liberty, I'm not going to talk to the pink-haired goofballs. Like, I'm going to talk to the people who are serious, and they're right wing. They're expressing right wing values. This idea of having a stable currency and having respect for property rights, all these sorts of things. These are all right wing ideals. The zero time, or the time preference for power, being where the leftists have high time preference for power, rightists have low time preference for power, and libertarians, at least theoretically, have zero time preference for power. That's a right wing perspective, and so I lost my train of thought again. He's talking about this implication that libertarianism somehow is opposed to the idea of boots on necks, and it just isn't. There's a time and a place for boots to be on necks, and so when you have if you have a privatized state, which is effectively what libertarians are describing, more properly a privatized government, because there's going to be government, then that government is going to have among its responsibilities putting a boot on a neck when that neck needs to have a boot put upon it. So today, there's this incoherency among libertarians where they will say taxation is theft, but participating in a political movement to counter those, to try to take power away from the people who would tax you, is immoral. So taxation is theft, and so is voting. Like, how does that square? And this is where one of the flaws in taking the nap just on its face is that there's ways of hurting people and taking their stuff that don't inherently seem violent. And libertarians are very comfortable with this idea, because taxation is theft. They take the money from you at the barrel of a gun. But if you were to somehow build up a movement to forcibly take control of the government, to defend yourself from the people who are taking control of the government to impose it upon you, that's a violation of your principles. So then this is just fantasy land. This is this fantasy land, completely abstracted from reality, no actual application of principle to real life. There has to be a boot put on a neck sometimes. And the question is, whose boot and whose neck, and under which circumstances? in what context. And inevitably, we're going to reach a point where people are going to need to defend themselves, and they need to have the tools necessary to be able to defend themselves, and they need to have a clear understanding of what property rights means, what violence is, the role that violence plays in a society. And so this idea, this insinuation that libertarianism somehow means nobody ever puts a boot on someone's neck, shows a misunderstanding of the philosophy itself, which is kind of rampant throughout those who subscribe to it. So he said, to continue, he said, the argument that says that the ends do not just...
If I can real quick,
yeah,
it kind of reminds me of, when I was saying, I was using the term like underachiever, and I think kind of what I meant with that was operating. It's very safe to operate in this idea of like potential, and not have to actually convert anything into like, that exists in like measurable reality. Like it's any kind of like objective measure of like success or failure. And I think what happened for a lot of people who are content to exist in only the world of potentiality, where you're smart and you have the answers and you have all this philosophy, is that in the rapid acceleration of what would we say, a fucking nightmare of the past like year and a half or so, like sort of rent kind of started to become due. So as opposed to like all these scenarios of like, that maybe people thought were going to play out over the course of like the next 25 years, within like 2 or 3 months, seemed like they were like really knocking down the door. I think sort of what the dividing line was that there were people who just remained content operating in this world, this hypothetical world, and then there were other people who sort of woke up to it. And someone in the comments when we were talking about consequences from with some of these younger people with an outlandish internet presence. Just look at January 6th. I think that might be sort of the cutoff. I think certainly like COVID, and the fortification of the election, and then maybe after like the fallout of January 6th or so, I think if people didn't sort of start asking themselves questions right around that point, that might be sort of the cutoff of that like dividing line that I was like talking about earlier. And so for the new fans, usually what happens is when I have to leave to go to my job, I'll start taking off my shirt. I'm going to spare you this time for the new fans, but just kind of know for the future that it might start up. It's starting to go on its own. Oh, okay. All right. I've caught myself. But yeah, I've got to actually take off. So
sounds good, buddy.
Fisk his comment.
Yeah, that's a good word.
I stole it.
Well done. All right, we'll talk to you later, bud. Okay. All right. So we're coming up on the 2-hour mark here, so I got to get out of here soon because I've got a whole bunch of work I have to do. But I want to finish responding to this comment here. I want to address real quick something in the chat here. Hank said it seems that Matt is either not aware of or does not consider minarchists to be libertarians. There are libertarians who have this belief that it is possible to have a limited state or government. And I have said before that I think that I actually said this on the conversation with Pete, that when I talk about libertarians, generally I just mean anarchists, like ANCAPs, because not anarchists, but ANCAP specifically. But I do recognize that there are minarchists who are there. I just think that if you're a minarchist, I think you're just even more confused than an ANCAP. And I don't say that to be insulting. I just think that the ANCAP has fully recognized the nature of the state, the nature of a democratic state, to the degree that you realize that limiting it is not even like theoretically possible in the sense that you're thinking of, that we like make it behave itself. The fact is that, as Popular Liberty has pointed out, the Constitution so effectively, quote unquote, limited the state that what it effectively did was it set a very high interest rate on power. So it encouraged the saving of power. If you have a high interest rate on something, you save it. You save it for the long term. And so it accumulated so much power. The fact that it was limited made it accumulate so much power that it became like the largest government ever. So there's a paradox here that if you try to limit government, if you try to make it somehow not the most powerful thing in the region, then you make it much bigger. You make it unaccountable. And this dynamic, it can be borne out in a number of different ways. And so I don't want to get into all of that today necessarily. You can go back and listen to past episodes where we've talked about that before. But my contention, our contention here, isn't that, number one, that you shouldn't use political parties at all. I don't think that it's unethical to use political parties to engage in the political system. But I think if you're going to do it, you need to do it smartly. And I think that when you do it, it's never going to work with the libertarian message. I think the libertarian message is the worst message that you can take into the political realm to have any sort of success. It just doesn't succeed because it's unrealistic, it's impractical. It doesn't ever take hold. And if you're getting involved in politics, by definition, what you're doing is trying to accumulate political power. That's just the way that the game works. That's the way that it functions. And so people who say that they want to get into politics, but not use their power, or that they're trying to get into politics to say that politics shouldn't exist, are like football players who are trying to protest the game of football by playing all 17 games this season. It's what's called a performative contradiction, which makes it makes you look like an idiot. Like, people see that and they're like, well, this is stupid. This is just completely incoherent. And then the fact of the matter, as we pointed out earlier, is the majority of people want to hurt people and take their stuff. So you're dealing with multiple issues there that are just going to make the libertarian political message a failure out of the gates. It's just dead on arrival, hands down. There's nothing that you're going to change about that. So as a libertarian, you need to recognize that what you've described, what you've come up with, is like the end goal. But you have to get to that point. You have to build the road to get to that end goal, where you have a society where property rights are respected absolutely. And when you get there, you're going to have to enforce it. So the paradox with liberty is that liberty must be enforced. The libertarian worldview must be enforced if it is to exist. People will not voluntarily sign up for it if you deliver it from a libertarian perspective. What you need to offer people is you need to offer people power. You need to offer people something that will solve their problems and take their power from them. Say, I'm giving you this thing, it will solve your problems. In return, give me power. As I said earlier, Popular Liberty said that libertarians don't trust anybody else to rule. People, there shouldn't be any rulers, and everybody else wants rulers. So libertarians should just be the rulers. Let me get back to this, replying to this comment here, because I'm sure that libertarians should be the rulers. That's going to trigger Daniel quite a bit, and understandably, I would have freaked out if I'd heard that from someone before. But he says, the argument that says that the ends do not justify the means is a very Christian idea. Whenever Matt says things like people need to be led, he is saying people need to be ruled. Correct. People need to be ruled. People want to be ruled even more. They want to be ruled. People don't want to be free. When you're trying to sell them freedom, you're selling them something they don't want. For at least the way you've conceived of freedom. The freedom to them is being ruled and having someone protect them, give them security, take care of them, give them a social safety net, all these other sorts of things. That's freedom to them. They want someone to provide that. So you trying to get them to take this other thing is you trying to sell them a product they don't want, or even worse, if you're getting into the political realm with them, you're trying to enforce a product on them that they don't want. He says, when Matt says things like, I want to not talk about the morality of something, these are very dangerous ideas. When someone doesn't worry about the morality of something, one can be led to some immoral things. This is the part I was getting at, where I've said before that we need to get into the sphere where we're discussing we're dealing with this as an engineering problem, not a moral problem. And the reason I've been waiting for somebody to bring up this and say, oh, you don't care about morality. It's not that I don't care about morality. It's that if you're getting involved in politics and you're taking the moral perspective on things, which is what libertarianism is ultimately. They're making a moral case for all this stuff. You now have to first convince people to accept your moral framing, to accept your morality, and then convince them to participate in your political view, to your political, the achieving of your political world. Trying to convince people to accept your morality is just a completely different venture altogether. So what I'm saying is that when you're engaging in the problem of politics, treat it like you're trying to solve any other problem. Like we need to come up with a solution for this problem. We need to engineer a solution for this problem. So if, for example, the state has, you might say, well, the state controls all the land, so I don't have anywhere where I can go. Okay, well, how much would it cost to buy an island? To buy it, to make it its own sovereign entity that answers to nobody. People will come up with all the arguments about why it would, they'll stop you, and there are all these other things. You come up with all the reasons why you can't do it. But what I'm saying is treat it like a problem to be solved. All of those reasons that would make it difficult are the solutions that need to be engineered. Just deal with the world as it is. So if the state says, if you want to live in Southern California, then you're going to be taxed XYZ. But then just make the money. Make enough money that you can survive and have the lifestyle that you want while being taxed that way. And then just solve the problems. Solve the problems as they arise. Don't try to come up with some elaborate moral reasoning that you then have to try to persuade everybody else to share your moral reasoning. Just meet them where they are. Give them whatever they want to get what you want. I'm not saying do immoral things. I'm saying assess this problem like an engineer, not like you're trying to solve ethical problems or moral problems. You're trying to solve things pragmatically. You're just coming up with solutions where everybody benefits from them. And you might say, well, it's not fair that I would have to, pay extra, that I would have to go out of my way to go do this thing. And, I'm being treated unfairly, and it's immoral that the government behaves this way. Sure, but the government behaves that way because they can. And complaining that they do is wasting your time. Don't complain that they're behaving inappropriately, that they're behaving poorly. Don't make it a moral conversation. Turn the conversation to the engineering perspective, where you're taking it just as a constant, take the state as a constant, and engineer a way around it. Treat it as a corrupted node on a network, and don't try to solve say, well, this is the node that should be there. Just say this is the node that is there, and route around it. Don't try to solve the problem. Don't try to come up with a better version of the thing that's there and try to fix it from within. Just build around it. And sometimes you might have to operate within it to get it to move in the direction that you want, or to insert some sort of Trojan horse that benefits your project that you're doing, or whatever. Get involved in lobbying. Fund a campaign to get your preferred governor or your preferred mayor or whatever. But you're just dealing with these on a pragmatic issue. The question isn't, is it right or wrong to buy off a politician? It's there. The politician is there for sale. Just buy them. Don't try to tell people, it's wrong to buy politicians. Just go buy one. Continuing with his comment here. He said, so in Matt's understanding, if he didn't have the basics of the morality from Christianity and some of the basics of libertarianism about property rights, etc., he would veer pretty easily into some pretty immoral things. I think I kind of addressed that. I don't... Here, Daniel, you're just misunderstanding where I'm coming from. You've taken the words that I said, and you've gone a completely different direction, derived a completely different meaning, and you're criticizing that meaning, which is a straw man. And to your credit, or to in your defense, if I have explained myself poorly, that's on me. That's not on you. And so I'm trying to explain myself better here. He said, Matt is wrong about the LPMC entirely as well. The Mises Caucus is based around Hoppe's what should be done. Matt is making huge strawman about the LPMC. The LPMC is creating a huge working together and is trying to create the new leadership. Matt brings up a lot of points I already knew and made tons of straw men. And also, as Matt says, he has all the critiques that are very valid and very little the answers. So with the LPMC, again, we've got the same issue of there's lots of people involved who are all attempting to they're not all attempting to do different things. There's lots of people involved, and many of them are trying to do different things. What I'm speaking to is mostly specifically what Dave has said, because he's the one who's really spearheading all of this. But in general, where I think the LPMC has gone wrong is focusing their efforts in the LP. The fact that they have an LPMC instead of a GOPMC. Because it's a pragmatic conversation about the utility of a third party. So these issues, like I said this before, there's issues all the way down. There's issues with the messaging, with the libertarian message. There's issues with the strategy being in the wrong party. And then even within that, there's issues with the strategy within the strategy. It's like if you're going to take over the party, you would take it over to do things other than what they're talking about doing. And then also, if you're going to take over a party, well, you should take over a different party. And then if you're going to take over this party, well, you have to do it with a different message. You have to try to sell a different message. I'm not saying that they're never going to be successful with anything. I think the LPMC is definitely going to take over the LP. I just think that they're blowing a lot of political capital and getting a lot of people invested in a project that's not going to return nearly to the degree that would justify all that investment. I'm saying it's a strategic misstep. But then it also, by making a strategic misstep, you have opportunity cost, but then you also have the explicit, the actual consequences of engaging in this arena in this way. Where, like we said before, if the LPMC starts making waves in some sense, they're going to very quickly be turned into the new Proud Boys. And that's not an energy that you want around yourself. You're dragging yourself into the Eye of Sauron, but you don't have the ring. You don't actually have the ring to cast into Mount Doom. You're basically like running around pretending that you do and just drawing the Eye of Sauron on yourself without anything to fall back on, without anything going along parallel to you. The only way that political movements work is if they have capital working alongside them. And the LPMC doesn't have capital working alongside them. Not to the degree that they would need to have the level of success that they're expecting to have. So there's multiple different layers of critique here, and I'll confess that often it's easy to get started on one layer and wind up on a different one because they're so interconnected. But I think that there's going to be more opportunities going forward in the future, near and far, to get into this issue even further. Ultimately, I'm not going to talk about this for a whole lot longer, I don't think, because I'm not expecting to get the LPMC to change. They're already pot committed. They're already invested. My goal is to say enough things to pull people away from them, to say things that get the attention of people who might be feeling the urge to buy in, but if I can convince them in just the right way, I'll get them to not buy in and not go down that pathway. So basically, I'm just trying to pull people away from the LPMC route, and trying to get them involved in a different project. Trying to take over the LPMC and trying to take this route that they are. This is a peacetime activity. Going the route that they're going is the type of thing that you would do if you were bored. You're like, well, you're super prosperous, peaceful, everything's great. We're going to go try to take over a third political party and try to create some stir. The actual stuff that you can accomplish, like we're in a war, effectively. All politics is war. It's just on a continuum. Armies, two armies show up, and the one with the larger army is the one that wins. And we're getting to the point now where it doesn't even have to be the one with the largest army. And the rules are changing rapidly. But the stuff that you could do with a political party, even with the LP, even taking over a little irrelevant party, there's still things that you can accomplish. You can use that tool to do certain things. But to be most successful, you would want to be under the radar. You want to keep it quiet. You're using it strategically, pragmatically. Having a big, loud presidential campaign and like just like shooting your mouth off all over the place and raising hell directly compromises that potential efficacy. And it's like, okay, well, everyone's paying attention. You want to be able to move in darkness to do some of the things that you need to actually have a tangible effect on people's lives, to actually take the boot off the neck of some people. You have to operate at the state and local levels. You don't want headlines. You don't want people knowing about it. You don't need lots of numbers. You need a small group of dedicated, disciplined, focused individuals who are working almost exclusively behind the scenes. So this route that's being taken is just LARPing, really. It's LARPing, and I know a lot of people feel very excited about it, and more power to you. But my goal is to get the people who would. I want to find the people now who, a few years from now, would look back and say that was a mistake. I wish I wouldn't have gotten involved. I wish I wouldn't have gone down this pathway. Those are the ones that I'm trying to find. And if you don't fit that, if you don't think that you fit that, then fine. We don't need you around here. We wish you well, and hopefully we're wrong with our assessment. But we have a specific target here with the audience, a specific group of people that we're trying to get, and those those are the ones that we want. So let me check the comments here and see if there's anything directly that I need to respond to before I wrap this up. I haven't really been able to keep up with the chat this week, and but what I do is I'll go back after the fact and I'll read through what you guys have said. So and if I can, I'll try to reply to you some way if I know how to get a hold of you elsewhere, or maybe I'll address something in a future episode. So just scrolling through here, seeing if there's anything that jumps out that I need to reply to right now. Arguments about Christianity and Judaism. Parable of the Vineyard. Yeah, it's funny listening to people talk about Christianity versus Judaism who very much don't understand what they're talking about. Yeah, so popular liberty is, we're going to talk about more about this Christian thing in the future, because we're going to do a takedown of Yaron Brook, especially with respect to the conversation that he had with Michael Malice and Lex Friedman. I've just started listening to the conversation, and I'm partway into it, and I'm already trying to gouge my eyes out. It's just so bad. But you'll be hearing from us on that at some point here in the next week or two. Mr. Populibs and I will have that great conversation. John Hartman says, be as dark as night, and when you move as a thunderbolt. Indeed, sir. All right. So if you haven't listened to the Pete Quiñones interview, I'll put that in the chat, or in the show notes here, so you can go listen to that. We'll have this set up as I'm going to get everything set up as an actual podcast. You guys can start downloading it on iTunes and everything. I'm working on getting all that done. And then what's the other thing? Just follow, if you don't already follow me on Twitter, follow me at Real King Pilled. Follow Steven at Messina Inc. And just keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open for some interesting new projects coming down the pike. We're going to be doing some fun stuff. Got a lot of different people who are starting to talk about these same things, and people want to do some stuff to start spreading these ideas even more, and trying to dig them apart and figure out what other truths lie within them. So we got some fun stuff that's going to be happening. Once again, go to palomaverdecbd.com. Support our awesome sponsors. Carlos and Vanessa Abelard are good people, and we appreciate that they support us, and we would like to support them. So you can use promo code KING. You'll get 25% off any order over $75. Again, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and we will see you guys. Let's see. I think on Thursday. I think we'll be able to do another episode on Thursday here. But and then also keep an eye out for an announcement on a supporting listeners group. I've got a ton of stuff in the regular day job to do. We're got a young man here who's growing and developing super fast, and he requires lots of attention. and we've got lots of different things going on. So I'm hanging on by the skin of my teeth, trying to get stuff done. We'll get the supporting listeners group set up. We'll get the podcast up on all the podcatchers, and we'll do some other fun stuff too. So thanks for listening, guys. Thanks for being here. We will see you around.